Let's make a fabric pumpkin. It is so easy. So the first thing you're going to do is get my template. You can download the templates for free, or I do have a full pattern with written directions and lots of pictures in my Etsy shop. It comes with two sizes. We're going to do the smaller. And because this is directional fabric, it's really, really important to make sure the top of your fabric is lined up with the bigger part, because this is a part you're going to stuff. If you were to cut it this way, all your ghosts are going to be upside down and you're not going to be as happy with your pumpkin. Cut a few strips slightly wider than the template so that I can pile this, because we need to make 8 of these. Now this is 3 inches wide by 8 inches high. And for this one, I am going to make it all with the same fabric. But one thing I love about this pattern, because you're sewing it together, is you can make it look super scrappy. The other ones I've done, I've used 2 different ones, so they alternate. You could also, if you want it to be really scrappy looking, you could make it with 8 different fabric scraps. So each section of your pumpkin would have a different pattern. Okay, and I am going to cut these all at once. I'm going to pin through, and I know this is a lot to cut at once, but this is a stuffed project. So if it doesn't get cut absolutely perfectly, it's okay. So what kind of fabrics do you think you'll use? Will you use 8 of the same, 2 different fabrics and 4 pieces of each, or will you go wild and make it super scrappy with 8 different fabrics? Let me know in the comments what you're thinking. Now we're going to take our 8 pieces that is going to create our pumpkin, and we're going to sew them together, right sides together. Now there's 2 ways to do this. You can sew the first 2 and then just keep adding one until you get all 8 together and then do the final one. But I like to do it in pairs of 2 and then put them together, because that way I don't have to pin it when I'm doing them flat. But if you want to pin it, by all means, please do. And it doesn't matter if you start from the top edge or this edge, but what does matter is to backstitch at both ends. You don't want this to pop open after it is sewn together. So let's get this done. If you do them in sets of 2, you can also daisy chain them so that you don't have to totally take it out of your sewing machine with each one. If you're using more than one color fabric, make sure you are paying attention to which 2 you're putting together. So when I did 2 different fabrics, I would do 2 sets of each matching and then put them together in the order that I wanted when I sewed all 8 together. Now we are going to have 4 sets of 2. So we're going to cut those apart. And because I'm using one fabric, it's super easy. It doesn't matter what goes with what. So we're going to open that. And once they are sewn like this, I do pin or clip them together just to make sure they stay lined up. So I'm going to take these 2 sets. I'm just going to line up this one edge. And the most important one is this bottom one. You want to line up these 2 seams and that edge. All right, so we're going to repeat that, and we're going to get all these sections put together. As you get to that end, when you're adding more, make sure you don't sew onto this piece that is open. Don't go past that seam. When you hit the last seam, that's where you want to back up. Okay, when you get down here, remember you're matching this seam. This is the one we're sewing onto the rest. This seam with the rest, but you want to make sure you keep this part, this open side, out of that clump. So you're going to go right there, and then you're going to sew only to that seam line and back up there. Don't go over it and catch anything else. Now, before you leave your sewing machine, you're going to turn this right side out and just double check that the bottom is nice and secure. So you don't even have to turn it all the way. Just get it so that that inside, and you can see that's nicely stitched together. It's not really pulling. If you feel like it's a little loose and open, just have a thread. You can come back and just sew across the bottom with a 1/4 inch stitch, just to reinforce that bottom if you want to. But if you did double back at each time you hit the bottom and you didn't go over the other ones, you should be good to go. Now we're going to turn our pumpkin shape right side out. So you'll notice it looks kind of oblong, but once we stuff it, it's going to be a great pumpkin shape. So I'm going to take some polyfill or you can use any kind of fluffy stuffing that you prefer. And I'm just going to take little pieces at a time, starting in the bottom and then just kind of pushing it out. You want to put it in and make sure that you don't get big air bubbles, because then it's not going to have a great shape for you. So you just keep shoving the stuffing in. All right, so we're getting to a pretty good spot. You want it to be firm but still smushable. So then you just want to start going around and making sure it's filled in nicely in all these different spots. Now we have a big hole in the middle, so we need to add a little bit more. Just kind of pushing and moving it to a shape that you like. Now you don't want to overstuff it because we still need to pull all of this in tight to the center. Now we're going to gather the top to close that up. So what I've done is I've grabbed some thread from the sewing machine and just doubled it up, put a knot, and left a tail 5 or 6 inches long. So I'm going to start with the needle under the fabric about a 1/2 inch from the raw edge. And I'm going to pull that. And then I'm going to do 2 little loops just to secure that, because if that knot isn't quite big enough, when you start pulling, it's going to pop and it's going to get messed up. Ask me how I know. This little pumpkin, I've done a bunch of these. This one is just giving me grief. Okay, so this is my new method. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to do some pretty big stitches. If you do them too small, it'll be really hard to pull to gather. So you want them quite large. I'm going to go all the way around. Now, because this has been giving me such grief in the pulling and tying off the end, and I decided it would be easier if I had another person here to help me hold it, but I don't, I have come up with a plan. So now we're back to the end thread. Leave your needle on. I'm going to take some big quilting safety pins, and I'm going to squeeze this in, and I am going to do a couple big safety pin chunks to help keep this fabric already in, so it's not having to pull quite as much with the thread, and it'll be easier to pull and tie it off. Make sure your safety pins are lower than where your stitching is. You don't want them on or above the stitching. See, so now it's not as tight, and don't worry about how it looks, because once we take those pins out, it'll be fine. So now we have our end, and we're just going to pull the needle. And if you're going to use the felt stem, you're just going to pull it all the way closed so you can't see the stuffing if at all possible. But if you want to use a stick or a dowel rod or a cinnamon stick, you're going to put that in the center right now, and we're going to gather around it. And just be careful. It's probably better to pull on the needle than on the thread, because I don't want anyone to end up cutting their hand on this thread. Oh yeah, those safety pins helped a lot. So when you get it tightened up like that, sew a couple stitches. You can hold it and tie this in a knot. That would be ideal. And then I'm going to throw a few more stitches in there. You might want to use a thread that matches. I mean, this does match the ghost, but that matches your pumpkin, because if any of them show, most will be covered by the leaf, but if any of them show, it'll kind of match. Okay, whoo, we did it. I'm going to cut that end off. I'm not cutting off the end with the needle yet. I'm going to take these pins out. Like I said, I have done like 5 of these, and this one is the most difficult one, I swear, because I'm trying to film it. But this will help you if you get into struggles. So now I'm just going to do a few more little stitches across and around that cinnamon stick to just really secure this. So now if you need to, you can rearrange just kind of mush the stuffing around so that you get a shape that you like. And you can leave it just like this. Or you can add embroidery floss to your seam lines to really make it tuck and accentuate the sections of the pumpkin. So let's do that. Black embroidery floss, a little more than twice as long as one of the seam lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this needle, I'm going to find one of these seam lines, and I'm going to poke this straight through the pumpkin. You want to get it at the seam line, and then you want to figure out how to poke it to be at the seam line down here too. So you might have to just keep poking and pushing down to get the tip of it. Pull that through, and then you're going to take that embroidery floss and you're going to make sure it's running along the seam line, and then you're just going to tie it. And see how when you go to tie it, you can pull it, and you can pull it just a little bit or more, and it's going to affect how much that's going to buckle. Tie that at the bottom. So you're going to do that for all 8. So it does end up being a little bit messy looking at the bottom, but you can just cut out a circle of felt and hot glue that on at the end so that it looks nice and finished. These two are both the larger ones, and you'll notice that when you do the thread to accentuate those lines, it does make your pumpkin a little bit shorter and wider, but it's kind of fun to have a combination of those if you're putting them in a group. So now we have our pumpkin sewn together, we have our stem. If we hadn't done that, we would be hand stitching this on there now. So now all we need to do is attach our leaf. You could do one or two, and our vine. To make your leaf, you're just going to take a piece of felt, and I've decided to go with a softer kind of olive green. You can also do a bright green, or I mean, you could do, because I'm doing a Halloween pumpkin, you could do black, you could do purple, you could get fancy, but I don't have those colors, so I'm just going to go with this and have it match my other pumpkins. Because this is a much smaller shape with a little more intricate shape, I'm going to use small fabric scissors and just trim around. And again, nobody's going to know exactly what your pattern looks like. So if it's not cut perfectly, it really doesn't matter. You just want the basic shape. And so that's why I'm not even pinning this. All right, so now we have our leaf. Now the leaf you can do flat, but my intention in making it with this notch is that you're going to put a little bit of glue on the one side, and put that down. And I always strategically place my leaf to cover the most unsightly part of the gathering. Then I'm going to put a little dot on the top, and I'm going to fold that, because that gives your leaf, be careful, hot glue is hot. It gives your leaf a little pinch and a little bit more shape and personality. And then I'm going to put another little spot underneath so that stays on nicely. Okay, now let me show you how I created the vine. I'm going to take a 10-inch piece of twine. You could use yarn, you could use ribbon, whatever you want to use. I just had this thing of twine that I use for other projects. Then I'm going to take some jewelry wire. So you can use any kind of wire. Don't cut wire with your sewing scissors, ever, ever, ever. These are craft scissors, so I'm going to use those. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hot glue the string along the wires. So what I do is I line up the twine and the wire, and then I put a little bit onto the twine and then press the wire on there. And if you can handle touching hot glue, I often press that down so that it kind of goes around the wire. Now I'm just going to move down the twine and do the same thing in a few little spots. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like, and ring that bell so you don't miss a video. I'm going to keep the glue gun turned on because you might need a little bit more glue once you twist it. So this part is going to wrap around the stem, but then we're also just going to twist it gently to make that cool loop so it looks like a little vine coming off of your pumpkin. And sometimes as you twist it, you're going to find the wire and the string move apart a little bit more than you'd like, so you can always add a little bit more glue. And like this one, the wire was showing on top, so I just pushed the string around so that the wire is going to be on the back. So usually I'm adding at least another dot or two, but I really think that this adds just that extra touch to make your fabric pumpkin really pop. You could do it with pipe cleaners as well, but I really like this natural look. This vine you can put on before or after you put on your leaf. I usually put it on before, but I forgot. Okay, so we're going to just twist that wire around the stem, whatever kind of stem you did. And then you can just adjust your vine to be positioned exactly how you want it. Now I'm also going to put a little dot of glue under where the twine meets the pumpkin, just to keep that nice and secure. Look at that, so cute. So this is a great project for fall, for Halloween. Would be great for teaching people to sew. So if you're teaching girls, maybe a Girl Scout group, and they're getting their sewing badge, this would be a fun one. They can make their own decor. I would love it if you would drop a comment and tell me how you plan on using these.